Heads up. Last night I was privy to a conversation about the indigenous history of slavery in Ghana. Why? I had the opportunity to visit Ghana in this year and study some of their social work practices, their social work agencies, and just really get into how we as a people can also look at other countries, what they're doing, how can we inform, how can we be informed. And so it was an exciting journey to be on that in that space with 95 other social workers and to really visit the places, and understand more about the culture, get education, and really understand why international education is so important to our journey, no matter what your industry is. And so I am super excited about, sharing that knowledge with all of you. And so, yeah, so I was privy to a conversation last night about the history of the indigenous slavery in Ghana. Now, it was eye opening to say the least because I read, I had, a book, a piece of literature, and I dived into about 5 chapters of that history, seminal information. And it took me aback. It really did. It took me aback. It took me to gave me clarity as to where it began. It gave me clarity as to how in every community and across every ethnicity, literally, slavery existed. But it took studying and looking at the impact of this slavery on a people who were most impacted by it. And so here in America, we know that they were taken from their country. We were taken from our ancestors. Let me just put it that way. We're taken from our native land to come to America for the building of of a nation, and it wasn't right. And but I also look back on how there there was a model. There was a model in which we were that was looked at. There was this indigenous model that was looked at and literally used against us as a people. And so there was such great need and such demand for commodities. There was such great need for for products and services. There was such great need across communities. And what fueled it the most was political warfare. You know, nation upon nation, um, as the country began to build itself state by state, it would not come without discord. And that discord involved war. Whoever won that war would claim a people. And so I began to think about the whole ideology of slavery and how that parallels to my values and beliefs and moral compass in Christ and the history of the Bible. And so I took a journey this morning, as I had not been back to Samuel since I discovered, where kingdom began, where we as a people were freed from the reigns of Egypt. We were freed from the domination. We were freed from a leadership that thought it was okay to dominate over people. which was the pharaohs of that time, who dominated over a people, Israel. And we were freed from Egypt. And along the journey, as we too fought to find our place, we had to pick up our own tools to ward off predators, as we journeyed to find our place in this new land. So I was looking at how God really wanted us to trust him. He wanted, after freeing us from Egypt, he gave us Moses, he gave us Jacob, he gave us Moses, he gave us, time and time again, he gave us his elect, to show us the way. And I was reminded of Samuel. When we get to 1 Samuel chapter 8, he talks about the Israelites' desire of a king. He just freed us from kingdom. He just freed us from the pharaohs to rule over us, but yet we, wanted and desire still yet a king. And Samuel shared this with God, who was his elect, and God assured him that he was not, it was not he who they rejected, but it was in fact God. And so I journeyed again this morning, because when I left from 8, I was really perplexed, because I saw that God said, give him a king, and then tell them the manner of this king. And it was slavery all over again. Slavery all over again, because we wanted to be ruled. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the criminal justice system. As someone who has studied the CJ system at the both undergrad and grad level, studied recidivism, and studied the impact of slavery or imprisonment, incarceration on a people, and how often in recidivism, when a people are institutionalized for so long and then released without the proper without the proper support systems, and there are so many policies and laws and rules that govern even after a person has served their time, then they have no resources. They have no one to turn to for help them to manage themselves in a free world. And how often many of them end up back in prison. Recidivism. It reminded me, so this is kind of threefold. Like, we were free from Egypt under rulership, enslaved. Then we're freed, and we want a people. We want a king. We want rulership, primarily because we didn't know how to survive. We didn't know how to trust God in our processes to be okay. And it reminded me of both Egypt, or the time when we were enslaved under Pharaoh, and the system we currently are affected by. So many of our people are affected by today. So this whole studying of the history of the indigenous slavery really got my mind to going about, where it all began and how nations warred, the political wars, how people, how they conceptualize slavery, how they not only conceptualize it, but how many ways slaves can be used, and then how when you conquer a nation in war, your people are sent into exile. Very, very similar to the Bible. How Israel, when Israel was conquered by Babylon, it literally was, its people were sent into exile. It was leveled. Israel was leveled because of its disobedience, which is right here in Samuel 8. And it was mind-boggling to me how God had given such instruction to even when he gave him in Samuel, he gave him a king, King Saul. And he wasn't the most ideal, but who cared? That's who God chose. He led Samuel to Saul to identify him as the king who would now rule over Israel, over the people of Israel. And they still wanted to do it their way. But God promised them that it was better to have, and let me just go back to this particular saying, because there was a piece that I honed in on this morning, and it was how obedience is better than sacrifice. And yeah, in chapter 1, Samuel 1, 1 Samuel chapter 15 and 22 says obedience is better than sacrifice. And Samuel said, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than a sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. So he was essentially saying, stop your sacrifices. And so what I noticed, even in our studies in the indigenous slavery in Ghana, was there were so many sacrifices that were being made from within that culture. And so it went on and on. And this is during the 15th to the 19th century. There's just so much to think about as it relates to myself as a believer, knowing that this is my final authority. The Bible is my final authority. I don't care what it is that I read. I don't care if it is these 15 secrets to time management. I'm always going to say, well, what did God say about that? You know, he has a word and an instruction about everything. And so I wanted to just say that I'm grateful today for truth. I'm grateful for, the ability to read, to know more, to not only have as subject matter the writings of these authors, but to have writings that were actually influenced by God, who is our final authority, who is our Elohim, who is our beginning and our end, especially in this time that we are in, where it's perilous. And I began to think, if a nation can, if slavery was the result of political war, and so many people were taken captive, entire communities, entire nations were taken captive as a result of conquest, then even in a country where we think that we are free, if we were ever to be targeted for war, are we prepared, even if we are targeted, even if there is a conquest against us, how will slavery emerge? So I think about that. That's on my mind, and I think about what's on the mind of God. Even in that, He would want me to trust Him. He would want me to study, so I have the answer. So my question is to God, to take a deeper dive into, even if that happened, God, what's your instruction for me in that time? What is your instruction for me? Because you say to trust you, to have faith, but I also know that He says faith without works is dead. Now we know that even in war, everyone suffers in war. There's no family that won't suffer, because your war is warfare. So if ever we were faced with the possibility of such a thing, are you prepared to sustain, even even if even if that happened? Are you prepared to sustain? Do you understand the word of God in a way that you can give Him back His word, because He hearkens to that, just as His angels hearken unto His word, who are also tools for us to call upon in war, even in war. We know that even in 1 Samuel, when they were going up against the Philistines, when He appointed Saul to be king, he had to go up against these uncircumcised Philistines. What frightened me was when his son Jonathan veered off. He wasn't, and basically Jonathan was like, if he can bless him, then he can bless me either way, either way. And so he veered off and was not obedient to following the rule. And even as a son, he when he veered off, he missed something. He was misguided by knowledge that King Saul shared after conquering the Philistines. He, or the Moabites, I don't know which tribe it was that he was fighting against. But even after conquering them, He instructed them not to eat anything. But Jonathan was not aware of that. I was like, wow, he was out of place. How often are we out of place and not able to hear the instructions, and our position ourselves for harm, because as a result of Jonathan not hearing, the instructions from his father not to eat, he then, when the honeysuckle, when he stumbled upon the honey, he poked the honey and he straight to his face. He went to eating it, and so now he's subject to surely die. So, you know, Saul at that time he was given God's blessing, even though, but surely he was given God's blessing. The people were given God's blessing, but He said, if you are not obedient, the people shall die and your king shall die too. You all will be conquered. And that's basically was God's order. Wow. And so I dug a little deeper and began to see how King Saul made his appeal to God for his son, stating that God do so and more. In chapter 1, 14 and First Samuel 14 is where the honey situation unveiled itself. And Jonathan heard not when his father charged the people with the oath. He said he made an oath, not to eat. And Jonathan set forth the end of his rod to eat, and he ate and enlightened himself. Because he said, every man who did would be cursed. This is how easy a curse can come upon us. This is how easy a curse can come upon us, is when we are not in place, we're not studying to show ourselves approved, and we're not following instruction. This is instruction. The Bible is instruction for us, and that was given to us as a gift to follow, right? Influenced by God himself, right? These individuals were influenced by God, who is a spirit, right? And so, cursed be the man that eateth any food this day, is the instruction that King Saul had given, his father had given. Now he's in big trouble. He's in big trouble, and he realizes after hearing that he is subject to die. And in that moment, King Saul was not aware that Jonathan didn't know. Tell me what then Saul said to Jonathan in 14 and 43. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what thou hast done. And Jonathan told him and said, I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and lo, I must die. Because he was instructed that he was going to die by the people. That your dad said, don't do that. And Saul answered, God, do so and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. And the people said unto Saul, shall Jonathan die, who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel? So Jonathan was also a part of the conquest. He did a good thing. Like, he fought against those Philistines. He took them down. So that was the great salvation that they were speaking of in Israel. God forbid, as the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he hath wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, that he die not. Then Saul went up from the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. They were all vexed by him and his ability to conquer. Now, there's more to this moral to this story that I want to dive into, and I don't want to take up all that time now, but I just wanted to show you, like, there's so much parallel when we are reading texts. Invited to this book club, about the indigenous slavery of Ghana, learning so much about the history of Africa and its people that I identify with, our ancestors, so many things, that knowledge I've been given from the Bible. So when I walked into this space to read this story, I was perplexed by all of the going-ons. And especially the sacrifices and things that we were instructed not to do, even then, in the 15th through the 19th century, and how it took me back to the story of 1 Samuel, all the inner workings and how we came into wanting a king over God. Again, took me back to the kings and the warfare of slavery. So much to think about. And so much to dissect. And I want to do that here with you all. We'll be talking a lot more about that our goal is to leave the 99 and touch the one, touch one life and touch millions, because there are many who are called, but many who are called and few are chosen. Many are called and few are chosen. Those who are chosen um, will lead lots of people. So the goal is to make sure that we are in right understanding, and that we are not out of place for instruction, um, that we are reading our word and having and building a relationship with God, because He is our final authority and He's always speaking every day, even through our lives, through stories. The Bible is full of stories. Um, Books are full of stories. History is full of stories. Um, and yeah, so I'm super excited to share that with you all, because I felt that there was a need to deviate today from it all, you know, because our goal today was to wrap it up, to wrap up our 15 secrets for time management that we have been studying over the last 15 weeks. But again, no matter what we study as a believer here on this channel, my goal is to you say, well, what does God say about that? No matter the subject material, what does God say about that? So that I'm always careful to be in place. And I think that that's the message today, is being in place. Jonathan was not in place to hear that he wasn't supposed to eat, and it could have cost him his life. So make sure you're in place today. Make sure that you're getting sound understanding from God and His Word. And all He wants from us is obedience. That is all. When He did not ask us for a sacrifice, He doesn't want us sacrificing. He wants obedience to His Word and His instructions for our life. And that is why our land has been accursed. That's why we've had a people accursed. That is why we have had such a struggle in realizing the promises of God, is because we lack obedience to His Word. We lack obedience to His Word. And so be in place today. Be in place today so you don't miss Him. To God be the glory on today. I'm Dr. Eve. Welcome to Touch One Life, Touch Millions, the podcast. We leave the 99 to go after the one, even through what we read, what we know, and how we apply what we learn to our lives. Peace and blessings to you all today. Go out and have the most amazing day, and whatever you do, don't let anyone get in the way on your journey to becoming who God has called you to become.